I'm Moon Harper, 26, and I've spent the last decade hiding my light so my adopted sister, Raven Brooks, wouldn't burn my world down. My story doesn't start with hate. It starts with fear. The kind of fear that seeps into your bones and makes you shrink inside your own life. Growing up in San Francisco's foggy Mission District, I used to think the world was made of second chances and soft mornings. My parents, Evelyn, a high school counselor with a savior complex, and Thomas, a retired firefighter with guilt in his eyes, believed they could rescue anyone. That belief brought Raven into our family. She was 14 when she arrived, all sharp edges, silence, and scars that never seemed to heal. I was 16, bright-eyed and dreaming of becoming a neurosurgeon, obsessed with order, logic, and fixing broken things. Raven didn't believe in order. She believed in survival. First, I wanted to be her friend. I thought if I could just be kind enough, patient enough, she'd see me as a sister. But Raven saw me as something else. A mirror reflecting everything she thought she'd never have. Every A on my report card, every smile from our parents, every bit of stability I didn't realize was fragile. It was fuel for her fury. In our Victorian house with creaky floors and fog seeping through old windows, tension became another family member. Evelyn excused every outburst. She's been through so much, Moon. Don't flaunt your success where Raven can see it. Thomas just stared into his coffee, his silence louder than her screams. That's the thing about living with someone's rage. You start mistaking fear for love. You learn to dim yourself to keep the peace. You celebrate quietly. You exist softly. I was 16 when Raven smashed my science fair trophy against my skull. My mother called it a misunderstanding. I called it the beginning. Because from that night on, I understood something no one else in that house would say out loud. In my family, love came with conditions, and safety was never one of them. If you're still listening, we want to sincerely thank you for spending your time with us. Truly means a lot. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments and let's see how far this message has reached. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I highly recommend doing it now so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. These aren't just ordinary stories. They're filled with meaningful life lessons that can inspire, teach, and stay with you long after the video ends. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. I still remember the smell of lemon polish and dust that night, the night everything changed. I was 16, standing in our living room, holding my first place science fair trophy like it was proof that all those late nights, all those dreams of understanding the human brain meant something. My father had driven me home after the fair, proud but quiet, his rough hand squeezing my shoulder before he retreated into his usual silence. My mother barely looked up from grading papers, mumbling something about "good job, sweetheart." But Raven, she stood by the window, arms crossed, face lit by the flicker of the streetlight outside. When I turned toward her, I saw it. The jealousy wasn't just in her eyes. It was in the way her body stiffened, the way her jaw clenched like she was chewing on every memory of being unloved. "Do you want to see it?" I asked, stupidly hopeful. They said my project could go to regionals. She stared at me, her lips twitching into something halfway between a smile and a snarl. "You don't deserve this." I thought she was joking. I laughed, a nervous, shaky laugh. "What do you mean?" But she was already moving. The trophy glinted once before crashing into my forehead. The sound was wet, sharp, and final. I dropped to my knees, metal and glass scattering like tiny stars across the wooden floor. I remember the burn of tears, the taste of iron in my mouth, the foggy outline of her shadow above me. When I screamed for my mother, Evelyn rushed in, face pale, eyes darting from the blood on my temple to the broken trophy. But instead of holding me, she turned on me. "Moon, what did you say to her?" My voice shook. "Nothing. Don't lie to me. You know how fragile she is. You can't gloat when she's struggling." I couldn't understand. The pain was still pulsing, hot and dizzying, and she was scolding me. Raven stood behind her, silent, almost smug, a drop of my blood still speckled on her wrist. My father appeared in the doorway, his firefighter's frame blocking the light, eyes full of something I didn't yet recognize, shame. He didn't speak. He never did when it came to Raven. That night, something inside me broke. I learned that my achievements were dangerous. The next morning, Evelyn acted like nothing happened. She made pancakes for Raven, hummed as she packed lunches, and told me to keep things peaceful. I walked to school with my hair covering the small bandage on my forehead, pretending everything was fine. But I carried that moment in my bones. It became the quiet rule of our home. My success equaled Raven's suffering, so I started hiding. I stopped mentioning grades. I deleted congratulatory messages from teachers before Raven could see them. I told people I did okay instead of, I got an A. I laughed softly, walked lightly, breathed quietly. Also, my sister wouldn't explode. Evelyn praised me for being understanding. Thomas nodded but never intervened. In that house, survival meant silence. Over the years, Raven's anger became predictable. A storm I could sense before it struck. A slammed door if I smiled too much. A shredded notebook if I got praised at dinner. Once, she tore my biology textbook in half because I said I liked the brain more than the heart. "You don't have one anyway," she hissed. I believed her. That's the worst part. By the time I turned 18, I'd learned to disappear without leaving the room. I wore muted colors. I spoke softly. I celebrated alone. The girl who used to dream of slicing through the chaos of the human brain now lived inside her own, dissecting every word, every gesture, trying not to trigger a reaction. Then one spring morning everything changed. The envelope came from Stanford, thick and promising. My hands trembled as I tore it open in my bedroom, sunlight streaking through the blinds. The words blurred as I read them aloud to myself. "Congratulations. You've been accepted to the School of Medicine." I cried, not because I couldn't believe it, but because it felt like freedom finally had a shape. I pictured the red rooftops, the quiet libraries, the sound of my own footsteps unshadowed by someone else's rage. I thought maybe, just maybe, I could be Moon again. But in my house, hope was a luxury. When I told my mother, her smile was tight, almost pained. "That's wonderful, Moon," she said flatly. "But have you thought about what this means for Raven?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" "She needs to come with you. Palo Alto has trauma programs. She can't handle you leaving." My heart sank. "Mom," she tried to. I stopped myself. Talking about the poison, the broken trophies, the stares that made my skin crawl, it was useless. Evelyn always had a reason. Always wrapped Raven's cruelty in therapy words. Projection, regression, trauma response. "She can't come with me," I said quietly. "Stanford is my chance to start over. I'll help her find a program here, near home." Evelyn's expression hardened. "If you loved your sister, you'd help her heal. You're abandoning her, Moon." From the corner of the kitchen, Raven leaned against the fridge, her mouth curving into that same half-smile I'd seen years ago, the one that came right before everything went wrong. She didn't say anything, but her silence felt like a blade. Thomas sat at the table, pretending to read the newspaper. His knuckles were white around the edges of the pages. I wanted him to say something, anything. But he just looked at me over the rim of his glasses, then back down again, disappearing behind his quiet guilt. I went back to my room, closed the door, and pressed the acceptance letter against my chest. I should have felt proud. Instead, I felt doomed. That night, I lay awake, hearing Raven's laughter echo from the hallway. My mother's voice floated in, soft but sharp. "Don't flaunt your success where Raven can see it." Every victory came with a warning. Don't let Raven see. Don't let Mom hear. Don't exist too loudly. It's strange how silence can become your identity. I thought playing small would keep me safe, that if I dimmed my own light, maybe the fire in Raven would burn out. But darkness doesn't calm a storm. It just hides the damage. And somewhere deep down, even as I folded that Stanford letter into a drawer, I knew, no matter how quiet I became, she'd still find a reason to hate me. The smell hit her first sharp chemical wrong. Moon froze in the kitchen doorway, her eyes catching the faint glimmer of white powder swirling in the air as Raven stirred the pot on the stove. The aroma of stew was overpowered by something acrid, metallic. Rat poison, her mind whispered before she even wanted to believe it. Her breath hitched, and for a second the world narrowed down to the spoon in Raven's hand. "Raven," Moon said quietly, stepping closer. "What are you doing?" Her sister turned, eyes wide and unblinking. The kitchen light flickered, revealing the tension twisting between them like a rope ready to snap. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Moon's voice cracked through the silence. "You put something in the food." Raven's lips curved, not quite a smile. "You always think you're so smart, Moon. Always watching, always judging." The air felt electric. Moon lunged forward, grabbing the pot, and the metal clanged against the stove. The smell intensified. Her throat tightened, and her stomach turned as she realized it wasn't just paranoia. It was real. She could smell the poison. "Are you insane?" she screamed, slamming the pot down. The kitchen light flickered again, dim yellow against the smoke rising from the burner. Footsteps echoed down the hallway, and Evelyn appeared, her robe fluttering behind her. Her face, tired and composed as ever, surveyed the scene like a judge arriving too late for the crime. "What's going on here?" "Raven tried to. She put poison in the food," Moon shouted, her voice trembling between fear and fury. "I saw her." Raven was already crying. Perfect practice tears. "It was just baking powder," she sobbed. "I didn't mean." "She's twisting everything." Evelyn sighed, rubbing her temples. "Moon, must you always make everything dramatic? Be humble. Don't accuse your sister without proof." Those words landed like shards of glass. Be humble. That was Evelyn's answer to everything. The golden commandment of their household. Swallow the pain, smooth the surface, pretend it's fine. Moon felt her chest tighten, the rage and disbelief boiling inside her until she couldn't breathe. She looked at Raven, then at her mother, realizing something she had spent years trying not to see. Evelyn wasn't protecting Raven. She was protecting the cycle, the toxic balance that kept them all in orbit around her guilt. The perfect family image, no matter what it cost. Moon's hands trembled as she reached for her bag, her voice shaking but firm. "You'll never stop her, Mom. Because stopping her means facing yourself." Evelyn didn't answer. She just turned away, as if silence could erase what had just happened. That night, Moon packed in the dark. No tears. Just the cold rhythm of zippers and folded clothes. She withdrew what little money she had saved, applied for a student loan, and booked a bus ticket to California. Her acceptance to Stanford had always felt like a dream. Now it was her escape route. As the bus pulled out of the station, the city lights blurred through the window. Her reflection stared back, pale, exhausted but alive. The whisper of her own voice echoed in her head, fragile yet unbreakable. "I wasn't escaping my sister. I was escaping my mother's guilt." For the first time, she felt what freedom really meant. Not joy, not relief, but silence. The kind of silence that hurt, that made you realize you'd left a piece of yourself behind just to survive. At Stanford, Moon tried to rebuild herself. New room, new people, new rhythm. She thought the past was miles away, sealed behind her. But the ghosts of her family had longer reach than she imagined. It started with a simple notification. Application withdrawal confirmed. Her stomach dropped as she read the email. It said she had voluntarily withdrawn from Stanford. Impossible. She hadn't touched her account in days. Her calls to the admissions office led nowhere. They said the request came from her official email, the same one she used for everything. The realization hit her like cold water. Someone had hacked her. Lila, a computer science major with a habit of coding at midnight, agreed to help. They sat in the dim glow of her dorm room, laptops open, the blue light reflecting off tired faces. Moon's heart pounded as lines of code scrolled across Lila's screen. "Whoever did this knew what they were doing," Lila muttered. "They didn't just access your email. They masked their IP. But look," she paused, zooming in on a fragment of metadata. "This trace. It's from your hometown." Moon felt the blood drain from her face. "No," she whispered. "It can't be." But it was. After hours of digging, Lila found more. A fake complaint letter sent to Stanford's ethics board, accusing Moon of plagiarism and falsifying her transcripts. The sender? Evelyn, using an alias connected to Raven's old email. Moon's breath came shallow. "My mother, she did this with her." It was like the air left the room. All the walls she had built inside herself cracked open. Betrayal didn't even feel like the right word. It was something colder, emptier. She had run thousands of miles away, crossed states, rebuilt her name, only to be hunted down by the same people who said they loved her. For days she couldn't eat, couldn't go to class. Every face in the hallway looked like a threat, every sound like an accusation. Stanford, the symbol of her new life, had become a reminder that even freedom could be poisoned. Lila was the one who broke the silence. "You can fight back," she said, her tone steady. "But not by screaming at ghosts. You need to outsmart them." That night, Moon didn't sleep. She stared at her laptop, rereading the fake documents, the poisoned words written in the same formal tone her mother always used in family emails. And then she made a decision. If they wanted to destroy her, she would make sure they struck at a shadow. She crafted a plan, simple but sharp. Using Lila's help, she set up a decoy address, a false mailing location linked to a supposed transfer request. If her family tried to track her to sabotage her again, all they would find was that she had moved somewhere else, far away, unreachable. In reality, she stayed right where she was under a different name, keeping her real records hidden behind encrypted firewalls. It wasn't revenge. It was survival, the only language her family had ever taught her. But the victory didn't feel clean. Every time she walked across campus, Moon carried the invisible weight of everything she'd lost. Trust, belonging, the hope that her mother might ever love her without condition. She had learned to smile again, to laugh with classmates, to blend in. Yet at night, when the world went quiet, she could still hear the echo of her mother's voice telling her to be humble. Now she understood what humility really meant in her family, submission disguised as grace. The poison wasn't just in the food. It had always been in the way they loved. And as the wind whispered through the Stanford courtyard, Moon realized she hadn't escaped the past completely. She had only learned to walk beside it, to look it in the eye and keep moving forward, even when it hurt to breathe. The hall glowed under the sterile white light of celebration. 1,000 seats lined in perfect order. It was supposed to be a day of triumph, the day the students wore their white coats for the first time, symbolizing years of struggle and sacrifice. But for Moon, it was something else entirely. The white coat had never felt like victory. It felt like a trap. That morning, she left home before dawn, her heart pounding as if it already knew the storm waiting ahead. She posted a fake location online, a small act of rebellion, an attempt to protect the last sliver of privacy she had. She told the security guard that she wouldn't be attending, and she hid her pristine white coat at Lila's house, folded carefully in the back of a closet. That coat wasn't hers yet, not until she could wear it freely. When she reached the campus, everything was unnervingly quiet. The celebration was in full swing elsewhere, but Moon moved like a shadow, cutting through the corridors, her breath shallow. Every echo of her footsteps felt like a secret she couldn't afford to reveal. Her hands trembled as she pushed open the heavy doors of the auditorium. Inside, the air buzzed with pride and noise, the crowd's laughter echoing through the walls. Moon's eyes darted toward the stage. Students in crisp white coats stood proudly, smiling as cameras flashed. For them, this was the beginning of a dream. For her, it was the moment she stopped pretending. She pulled the coat from her back, the fabric smooth and cold in her hands. When she slipped her arms through the sleeves, the material whispered against her skin, a quiet rebellion. Somewhere else across campus, Evelyn and Raven were fuming. They'd gone to the wrong building, expecting to meet Moon there. Evelyn's anger was sharp and precise, like the click of her heels on marble floors. She cursed under her breath, calling Moon reckless, ungrateful, sick. Raven stayed silent, but her jaw tightened. For the first time, she wasn't sure if she was angry at her sister or their mother. Back in the hall, Moon's heart raced as the announcer called her name. The spotlight swung toward her, blinding, merciless. Yet for the first time, she didn't flinch. She stepped forward, the light catching the faint shimmer of tears in her eyes. The crowd hushed, sensing something fragile, something raw. Moon stood there, small, trembling, radiant, and whispered to herself, "For the first time, I wasn't hiding. I was healing." It was more than a confession. It was a quiet declaration of freedom. But the world doesn't forgive those who step out of line easily. Within hours, Evelyn launched a social media campaign. #SaveMoon. She painted her daughter as a troubled girl suffering from delusions, a brilliant student trapped in a psychological breakdown. The post spread like wildfire. Relatives reposted it, journalists quoted it, and classmates began to whisper behind their screens. "Poor Moon," they said. "She's not well." Suddenly, the family name, once a shield, became a weapon. The calls stopped coming. The professors who once praised her avoided eye contact. Lila deleted old photos of them together. Moon became a ghost in her own story, watching strangers discuss her sanity in public threads. But then came the twist no one saw coming. Raven, the sister who had always stood beside Evelyn, the one who mocked Moon's defiance, who had sabotaged her chances more than once, released an audio recording. The clip was grainy, but every word was clear. Evelyn's voice, cold and calculated, plotting to place Moon under a conservatorship. "We'll handle her finances, her choices," Evelyn said. "She doesn't need to think. We'll think for her." The internet froze. Comment sections exploded. Hashtags turned. Hashtag Save Moon became hashtag Save Moon from Evelyn. For Raven, it wasn't redemption, it was resistance. Her voice cracked when she posted the clip, the caption simple, "I can't let her take Moon away again." People started piecing it together. The pattern of control, the manipulation, the polished image of a perfect family built on silence. Reporters dug up old footage. Classmates shared their memories. For the first time, the public saw Moon not as a broken girl but as a survivor. Then Jasper, Moon's cousin, the one who'd always stayed neutral, stepped into the storm. He uploaded a video from an old family gathering. Evelyn, smiling at the camera, had her arm around Moon, whispering through clenched teeth, "Smile properly or I'll make you." Jasper didn't add commentary. He didn't need to. The clip spoke for itself. Within hours, the tide turned completely. Evelyn's campaign collapsed under the weight of her own words. The same media that once called Moon unstable now demanded justice. They praised Raven's courage, analyzed Jasper's clip, speculated on Evelyn's motives. And through it all, Moon stayed silent. She watched from her small apartment, the light of her phone flickering against her face. The world outside was on fire. Hashtags, interviews, outrage, but inside it was quiet. She ran her fingers over the white coat hanging on her wall. It no longer felt like a trap. Felt like truth. Every thread of it carried the memory of that moment on stage. The fear, the trembling, the sudden peace. The coat wasn't a symbol of perfection anymore. It was proof that she had chosen herself. For the first time, Moon didn't need anyone to save her. The café smelled of roasted beans and rain-soaked pavement. That faint, bittersweet scent that lingered in the air before something irreversible happened. The light outside was fading into gold. The kind that softens everything it touches. Moon had chosen this place carefully. Neutral ground, small, almost quiet enough to hold honesty without it breaking. When Evelyn arrived, the wind followed her in. She looked as composed as ever, her hair pinned perfectly, her pearl earrings catching the dim light. But her eyes darted, calculating. Thomas trailed behind her, his face drawn, his silence heavy. Clara, the mediator they'd convinced to come, sat at the edge of the booth, clutching her notepad like it might save her from the storm. And at the far corner, alone, Raven sat, tracing the rim of her coffee cup, her reflection trembling in the dark liquid. No one spoke for a long time. The hum of the espresso machine filled the space between them, low and rhythmic like a heartbeat that didn't belong to any of them. Evelyn broke the silence first, her voice smooth and professional, the same tone she used in interviews. "Moon," she began, "we're not here to fight. I just want to understand why you're doing this to yourself, to us." Moon looked at her mother, really looked. The immaculate posture, the rehearsed calm. It was almost impressive how Evelyn could turn even guilt into performance. "Doing this to you?" Moon said softly, almost to herself. "You mean telling the truth?" Evelyn's jaw tightened. "You made everything public. The family's reputation." Moon cut her off. "You made it public the moment you posted hashtag Save Moon. You told the world I was broken. You called it love." Thomas stirred, his voice hoarse from disuse. "She didn't mean to hurt you, Moon. You know your mother." "I know exactly who my mother is," Moon said. "I just don't think she knows who I am." The tension stretched thin like a string about to snap. Raven lifted her head then, her eyes wet but steady. She hadn't said a word since they sat down. Her lips trembled as she whispered, barely audible, "I tried." The words hung in the air. Fragile, honest, useless. Moon turned to her sister. For the first time in years, there was no accusation between them, only exhaustion. "I know," she said. And she meant it. Evelyn shifted in her seat, her control slipping. "You don't understand the pressure I was under," she said, her tone breaking. "The board, the family, the image, everything depended on keeping order. On keeping you safe." Moon reached into her bag and placed a small folder on the table. Inside were printed screenshots, the recordings Raven had released, the messages Evelyn thought she'd erased. Evidence. Quiet, devastating proof. Evelyn's hands froze midair, her face draining of color. "I'm not your project, Mom," Moon said, her voice calm but cutting through the room like glass. "I'm your proof that healing doesn't come from control." The café fell silent. Even the barista paused mid-motion, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Evelyn's lips parted but no sound came out. Her carefully built persona, the proud, composed matriarch, seemed to collapse inward. Thomas stared at the table ashamed. Clara, ever the outsider, looked like she wanted to disappear. Raven stood then, slow and deliberate. "She's right," she said. Her voice shook but it carried weight. "You can't fix people by caging them, Mom. You only teach them how to hide better." She turned to Moon, a faint, broken smile on her face. "You don't need me to protect you anymore." Then she walked toward the door, her footsteps echoing softly. No one tried to stop her. When the door closed behind her, the faint chime of the bell rang through the café, a small hollow sound that somehow felt like freedom. Moon sat there still. Outside, the sun had dipped lower, and the last light of day poured through the window, painting her face in gold. It caught the glint of a tear on her cheek, but she wasn't crying anymore. The air was still, almost peaceful. For the first time, there was no fear left in her body, only clarity. The conversation ended not with shouting, but with silence, the kind that comes when everything necessary has already been said. Evelyn stared at her daughter, realizing too late that control had never been love, and silence had never been protection. Moon stood, placed a few bills on the table, and walked out without looking back. The door closed softly behind her, and the fading sunlight caught in her hair. For the first time she looked free, not because she had won, but because she had stopped fighting to be understood. Raven didn't vanish completely. Weeks later, she joined a small therapy group across town. It was part of her probation agreement with herself. A promise to stop running from the mess and start tending to it. She found a job at a plant shop of all places. The air there was clean, humid, full of green things that grew quietly. She sent Moon small transfers every month. Nothing big, just enough to say, "I'm still here." Evelyn and Thomas began therapy too. It was awkward, halting, full of resentment and pauses, but it was something. For the first time, Evelyn didn't have an audience, only a mirror. And for the first time, she couldn't lie to it. As for Moon, she built a life of her own, one brick at a time. Her small studio in the Mission District smelled like coffee and paint. The walls were bare except for one framed photograph of the ocean. She worked hard, studied harder, and somehow became the top of her class. Her professor spoke about her with quiet respect now. Not pity, not curiosity, but admiration. On her 26th birthday, she didn't throw a party. She brewed coffee, opened the window to let the morning air in, and scrolled through her messages. Among the usual birthday texts from classmates and distant cousins, there was one from Raven. Just 6 words. "You deserve all good things." Moon stared at it for a long moment, her throat tightening. Then she smiled, a small genuine smile that reached her eyes. She whispered into the quiet room. It took 8 years, but she finally believed it. Outside, the city hummed, sirens, laughter, the low buzz of life. Inside, sunlight stretched across the floor like a soft promise. The white coat hung on the back of her chair. No longer a symbol of pressure or expectation. It was just a coat now, a part of her story but not the definition of it. Moon took a deep breath, the kind that fills you completely, and let it out slowly. The air felt lighter, freer. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't healing anymore. She had healed. The music fades into something quiet. A slow, reflective piano note that feels almost like breathing. The camera lingers on the empty cafe. The soft flicker of city lights outside. Moon's voice, calm, deliberate, begins to speak, no longer trembling but steady and clear. "Not every wounded person deserves your sacrifice," she says. "Because sometimes the ones who refuse to face their pain will make you carry it for them. And that's not love. That's surrender." The frame shifts to a shot of the white coat hanging by the window, sunlight brushing against its folds. "Love without boundaries becomes self-destruction," she continues. "It teaches you to disappear slowly, piece by piece, until you can't recognize the person you've become." Her voice softens, the music dipping lower. And silence. She pauses, a breath caught between grief and understanding. Silence is complicity, even in families. When we stay quiet to keep the peace, We let the wound grow deeper and call it harmony. A faint breeze moves through the room, stirring the edges of her notes and sketches. Freedom, she says, sometimes means walking alone first. It's terrifying. It's lonely. But it's the only way to know which voices are truly yours. The final words come almost like a whisper, trembling but unbroken. Healing is possible, even between enemies when truth is spoken. Because truth, no matter how much it hurts, is the first form of love. The screen fades to black. The piano fades too. Then Moon's voice returns one last time, warmer, closer, almost like she's speaking directly to the viewer. If Moon's story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Every story we tell reminds us. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most are the ones who teach us what love really means. Comment below, would you forgive a sister who once tried to destroy you?